All right, everyone. I think it might be one of those days. We're going to get pretty deep and weird today in a really good way. So my mind is already wandering all over the place. But let's get it started. Let's dive right in. Hey, everybody. John Selway here. Selway Techno Saturday here on 343 TV. Brought to you, of course, by 343 Labs Music Production School, where I am an instructor doing music production with Ableton Live, synthesis, and sound design. And yeah, here we are again. We're on 4 times a week now, right? Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. And Saturday is my day. Glad to see familiar names in the chat again. Hey, John H. Kingston III. Hey, Pavel. BPMF is in the house, my good old friend and Serotonin Records partner. Simple Sam, William Mindreaders, Martin Crockett. That's a new name, Mundulator. How's it going today? Interesting name. Hey, Lie Society. And hey, Elmer Fudge Official. It not just Elmer Fudge, but the official Elmer Fudge is in the chat today. So thanks for being here, everybody. Oh, look at this. The Mod Scientist is back. Nice name. Jamie Minto. More new names. Welcome, everybody. So, yeah, you know why we're here. You know what we do. We have a school in New York and a school in Berlin. We teach in-person classes. Things are getting going again, which is great. And, of course, online courses going on all the time. I have one starting up in June. I believe it's on a Sunday afternoon, synthesis and sound design. So, you know, if you're interested in what we're doing here and you're thinking about taking a class, you know, we've got a lot to offer. Check out what we've got. There are links down in the description for, you know, both our German site and our United States-based site. Also, you know, what we're doing here generally, you know, sharing what we do and growing our community, reaching out. And, you know, we have our Discord happening now. We've been building that up. There's a link also down in this description if you want to check that out. It's a good place to meet like-minded musicians, producers, get feedback on your tracks. We do beat battles. We do sample challenges. We do special events. And, you know, also if you're signed up for courses with us, we have dedicated channels for each class where the students and the instructors can, you know, share information and talk about what's going on in class and everything like that. So do check it out. Also, if you haven't already, please subscribe, hit the notifications, give us a reaction, let us know what you think. And, you know, we'll try to meet whatever our next goal for subscribers is. I keep saying 20,000, but I don't know. We just crossed 10,000. Maybe we could shoot for 15. I don't know. Let's see what we can do. Let's see how long it takes to get to the next level. Right. So let's see what's going on in the chat. Everybody's saying, hey, Facek says it's a great day for techno. What day isn't? And Max Wild, our illustrious, fearless leader, is here as usual. And Sean Higgins, Cyber Rain, in the house. Very good. So, nice collection of characters here. As always, you can ask questions, you know, for me or for our guest, and talk amongst yourselves as well. And let's keep this active and conversational. So, without further ado, let's introduce our guest for today. Let's bring him on in. This is Syrte. How's it going today?
Good. How are you?
Well, you know, we were talking a little bit earlier, and I was honestly, if I'm to be honest, I was feeling a little bit spacey today, but things are going all right.
It's a good day to feel spacey.
Exactly. Good day for techno, good day to space out.
Yeah.
Well, and electro and various other things. So this is, you know, your name is Stefan Wise, and you've been producing for a long time, right? I'm just going to tell everybody a little bit about you. And tell us a little bit about this project. You know, what is Syrte all about, and sort of where you coming from?
So I was reading Valerian and Laureline, one of the issues, and I had just bought the version that was translated into English, because I used to read the version that was translated into German when I was a kid. And you know, in the German version, everything is always very different. But then in the English version, one of the first panels, it was a city of 1,000 planets, or the empire of 1,000 planets, I think is what the story was. And it said, here is this solar system, the Empire of a Thousand Planet, and within it lies Syrte the Magnificent, the capital of the Empire of a Thousand Planet. And I was like, that's really cool that Syrte, not the magnificent part, but just Syrte. So it's like, if I ever end up doing something other than the Stefan Weiss thing, I'll call it Syrte. And then I started doing electro and called it Syrte. So it was born out of just reading comic books.
I think, and this is something that, I knew we were going to touch on. There's sort of an inherent kind of nerd element to a lot of electro and electro producers, and a lot of what we're inspired by, like the sci-fi stuff and comic books and all this futurism. And so that's definitely, you're right off the bat today, we're diving right into some supreme nerdiness associated with this style of music that we love so much.
Yeah.
I haven't ever read that comic, actually. I mean, I'm familiar with. Is there a movie about it? They did a movie of some of this, right?
Yeah, Luc Besson did a movie, and it was I can't remember the name, but it wasn't a very well received movie, unfortunately. It was visually really striking.
Yeah.
Like he poured millions and millions of dollars into the VFX budget, and the actors were just kind of left to read lines, unfortunately.
So like no really good direction to kind of give them focus, that kind of stuff.
It wasn't a Fifth Element. Let's put it that way.
Now there's a good one. That's for classic for me for sure.
Yeah.
Very nice. So, I guess you get a lot of inspiration from, comic books and movies for your music, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, comic books, movies, I've been watching sci-fi since I was 3 years old. So when I grew up in Italy, and on TV, they used to have a show called Captain Future. I don't know if you remember that.
That sounds, it rings a bell.
But it had this really iconic intro music. And it was this guy that was like half robot, like an android kind of person. And they would fly through space. And I watched that show religiously. And it got, when I was older, they stopped showing it on TV. And yeah, there it is.
That's the Captain Future intro. I've heard this before.
I found the vinyl record at a record store locally a while back.
Nice.
And it was sold before I could go back and get it.
Oh well. You
but
could
they
probably get it on
re-released the
Discogs,
soundtrack.
right? Oh, it got re-released? Perfect.
Yeah, it got re-released.
No, so much of our younger days, the cartoons we watched and the movies and everything, it's all filtered into, all kinds of music, but just especially electro and these kind of sci-fi themes, right? They're just tied together. Well, and techno as well, of course. All right, I'm going to stop now. That song's a little
That's actually not the intro song.
Oh, that's the US version. We want the Italian version, right?
No, you want the Euro version.
The Euro version. All right, we got to do this right.
Yeah, because it had this da-da-dun, 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 da-dun, da-da-dun. It had this really cool piano riff at the beginning. It's a very iconic intro theme. Yeah, there it is.
That sounds better.
Yeah.
It's in stereo. And it sounds like, Italo disco.
Exactly.
This is great. Pretty cheesy, though.
It is pretty cheesy. Yeah.
But this is just the kind of thing that captures your attention when you're a little kid, right? And it sticks with you forever.
3-year-old me,
And obviously, middle-aged you as well, still feeling it.
Yeah.
Nice. So as you can see, we can already, I was warning you about this before, like conversation can just kind of go all over the place. And I think that's the best way to start these shows out, is just to get to know, the guest and what we're interested in and what we're influenced by. Let's check in on the chat. I think it looks like everybody's still sort of saying hello. There's a lot of, hey, hi, how's it going? But James Fear says Nerd Planet. And I agree. That's the one we live on completely. And William Mindreaders mentions that the theme is not the same that you find on the Sci-Fi Channel, which is true. And Simple Sam, says it sounds like ABBA. Well, yeah, it's got that 70s melodic sense that you hear in those kind of pop melodies, right? And also a little bit of the Star Trek theme, na na, like everybody ripped that off in all the sci-fi.
Yeah, it's
themes.
kind of like an amalgamation of like cheesy late 70s disco music and Star Trek, and then like It also has like an Italo, like cheesy German dance music vibe to it. And I'm talking like German pop music from the early 80s,
which can be quite questionable, but also occasionally brilliant. Do you ever hear Captain Starlight, Zazu Captain Starlight? That's it's brilliant. It's so horrible and so good at the same time.
I'd have to hear it to recognize it. I'm sure I've heard it before.
Yeah, you have.
But I'd have to hear it.
Because I said it, I'm going to put it on because it's really amazing. And it starts out with like a string quartet, and then it goes into complete outer space.
I think I have heard this.
Of course.
Yeah.
It's awesome. As soon we're going to listen to this old stuff and kind of geek out a little bit, and then I want to get into some of your stuff, and let's get to know you as an artist, what kind of music you're making right now as Syrte, and after that, just so everybody knows sort of what the program is today. We're having our conversation, we're listening to music, we're hanging out, getting to know you guys and each other, and then answering your questions, and then we're going to get into some music production stuff, some of what's promised, what's advertised today. Here's where it gets crazy. I love this part. And it kind of goes into this like cosmic, spacey disco jam.
Yeah, I think I've heard this before.
Vocoders. You have some vocoder stuff you're going to play around with today, right?
Yeah, I love using vocoders a lot. In fact, my friends are always joking with me about that. But yeah, I'm big on vocoders.
Who doesn't use vocoders with electro?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
It can be kind of a cliche. It's really easy to do it in a way that's been done a million times before. So I do believe it's a challenge to do it in a fresh way. Or, all right, we don't need to hear the whole vocal, but to use vocoders and not be too cliche, to do something a little bit different, but also, or if you are going to be cliche about it, to be so good that you cannot deny like how awesome it sounds, with the beat and how it works in the track.
Well, and vocoding is still such an imperfect science, right? So it was invented originally to as a communication technology, and then there was a military application where they were using vocoding to essentially speak to each other in code without having someone else be able to decipher it. So you had the vocoded signal be decrypted on the other end. I think that's how it worked.
Yeah. No, I've looked into that, like the sort of the history of the vocoder and how I mean, it's actually, you can explain it in a kind of simple way, but there's actually some really complicated circuitry going on. And James threw up a comment here. He says he literally uses them on everything, not even kidding, LOL. So he's calling you out for using vocoders too much. You can never, if you're making electro, I don't believe there's too much when it comes to vocoders.
And I use them in various different ways, like when I was doing dub techno.
Yeah, it's so good for that. Wasn't that one of the original like basic channel tricks, was to use a vocoder for the chords?
I didn't know that that's what they did, but
I think I did. I think there's a thing where there's just like a sustained chord in the background, and they're using percussion to do the stabs with the vocoder.
That's how I do dub techno.
Yeah,
when I do dub techno, I have a vocoder. And the carrier signal is always a synth, and then I get the dubbiness from having 909 drums just on a polyrhythm, just
with a ton of the right kind of tape style delay or whatever, or filtered delay, saturated delay.
I don't use a lot of the tape echo. Okay. I never use a lot of the tape echo because I always thought it was really cliche for dub.
I prefer it more clean.
No, I prefer to use there's a plugin by Ursa DSP called the Lagrange.
I've heard of that. I've never used it.
It's a granular delay plugin, but it has a feedback circuit in it. And this is one of those plugins that you can use to literally blow your speakers. And I love it because you can get really dubby, or you can get things to be really shimmery and metallic, or you can get it to self-oscillate. So you can get the feedback turned all the way up with a limiter on your channel, and it'll start self-oscillating,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can tune the feedback.
Yeah, I mean that's the trick is the feedback and keeping it under control so it doesn't go. You got to get that balance right with the feedback.
Yeah,
no, I'm gonna look into that one.
And it's like right up my alley because I really love things that are on the verge of either falling apart or blowing up, and then being able to control that. And I mean sonically, obviously. So like having a sequence of plugins where the potential for it to feed back in on itself and blow my speakers is really high. But
Yeah.
then having a measure of control in place where I can just hold that right where I want it, you know, that's something that I really love doing.
I don't know if you're set up to demonstrate that today. I think you've got some other things set ready to go, but that would be a good one to do, and a dangerous one to do on a live stream because it could just get out of hand. Speaking of vocoders, let's listen to one of the tracks that you sent. Robot Heart. This is one of your tracks from a label called Avoidance, which is run by Soma Records, right?
Yes.
So Scotland-based, famous techno label. Soma's been around forever, and the guys that run it that do slam. They are definitely important in the history of techno for sure.
Yeah, I've been listening to their tracks since I was like 16 or 17. So to get signed onto that label was like, that was really cool.
Good goal to meet, or good notch on your belt.
Yeah. I wrote the lyrics and recorded the vocals for that in my dad's garage.
Nice.
Yeah.
How do you feel about writing lyrics?
You know, where I live out here in the country, it's like there's nothing around, so it's just nature. And what I really love about it is that it lets my thoughts run free. There's no interference from like having, you know, airplanes constantly flying over you and having you know, cars driving by constantly. It doesn't have that noise, so it really gives me the ability to just kind of think without boundaries. And so when I write lyrics, it just kind of comes from just not having that noise around you.
I think that's really important, like freeing yourself from the distractions that make it more difficult to have clear, coherent thoughts to write. I have done some songwriting, but very, very, very little. Lyrics always mess me up. I'm so self-critical. I'm too hard on myself. I'm like, oh, that sounds cliche or cheesy or trite or unoriginal. Now, I have to say, I do know this in terms of songwriting. A lot of times the lyric, like the sophistication of the lyrics isn't necessarily only what you write, but how it interacts with the melody and the musical elements. That gives it another dimension. So you could say some really simple stuff, but it comes out sounding, feeling like it's genius because of the music.
Well, I think the more I try to have lyrics be intelligent and have them make sense, the more it fails. So what I've learned
try
is
too
that
hard.
Yeah, so what I've learned is that I'll take my voice recorder that I carry almost everywhere with me. Whoops, there it is.
Yeah, I see.
So it's this little RO5 Roland.
It's a Roland. Those are great.
And I just ramble, I just ramble nonsense into it. And a lot of times it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like in an Underworld kind of way where it's like literal nonsense that he strings together.
You mean the group Underworld?
Yeah, the group Underworld, yeah. Because he writes observations and then strings them together to make them into intelligible concepts. I just ramble random stuff about, the universe and what I observe, and the less I try to have it make sense, the more it becomes something that I can end up using.
Okay.
And then I also kind of taught myself to not be so critical, because I wonder just how weird I can get that makes people go, okay, this guy is really dangerously strange. And the more I get into that territory, the more I want to have those lyrics be part of a song.
That's great. So you enjoy pushing those boundaries a little bit.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So like pretending to be a robot, or there's a track I put out on an EP last year, and it was all numbers. It's -181, 535, or 400, which, by the way, is Unix code for Alan Turing's birthday.
Nice.
And in it, I'm talking
More
about
nerdiness.
my robot bride and crossing the uncanny valley. And, you know, I think my friend was asking me, what is that about? And I said, oh, it's about a guy in the future that is like really in love with his robot wife.
Okay.
And he was kind of like, what? I said, yeah. So it's a future that may happen that we can't comprehend right now, but it's literally a guy singing a love song to his robot wife.
I don't know that that's so incomprehensible. It's, you know, there are people that feel for inanimate objects, and
Yeah.
if you're starting to create almost intelligent beings with, you know, robots with artificial intelligence, I could easily see people crossing that line. It may not even be in the future. I mean, already there are, you know, if you think of like kind of AI-based pop stars, you know, in Japan or that kind of thing, or you know what I mean? You know what I'm getting at? Like,
yeah, I understand what you're talking about, the integration of technology and human existence. I actually just wrote a story, or I wrote a short story recently called The Singularity, that deals with the gradual melding of technology in the human brain over the course of a 200-year period. And it's actually the short story that we used as the basis for the cover of one of the upcoming releases on Science Cult, which is a comic book.
Cool. Speaking of Science Cult, we should mention that, like, that's a label that you do,
yeah,
along with James, right?
It's three people. So it's James Trowbridge, or Jimmy Freer, or Visions of Gloucester's, and myself. And then we have DJ Red Eye, Scotty. He is he's like the brains behind all of the social media, Instagram. He's also A&R. He's also an extremely experienced and long-lived DJ. Like, he knows more about music than any of us combined, and so
nice.
He has a really good ear for what will work in a club setting, for what will work even down to like a specific location. So he's just amazing.
Sure.
Yeah, it's the three of us. We run Science Cult.
Yeah, and it's a label that I, you know, came on my radar. I got some promos, like, this stuff sounds good, and, you know, I've played some of your stuff. I don't DJ much, but for what it's worth, I put it in some tracks and some mixes. And actually, one of my favorites of yours, along with Visions of Gloucester's, is this IO Flyby track that was released on Science Cult. Let's check that one out.
Oh, that was our first release.
Yeah, and I think that's where I was like, that's from go. I was interested. You guys got me right away with your first release, and like your selection, and, you know, the concepts and the artwork, and the, you know, the vinyl that you guys are doing is all pretty top shelf, I would say.
Yeah, you know, I've been around for a minute. Go ahead.
I just want to acknowledge the chat. Someone asked about that. If you would tell us the name of that delay you mentioned earlier again.
Oh, it's called the Lagrange.
Lagrange.
Yeah, Lagrange. Lagrange.
Okay.
You can find it on the KVR website.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, so this one again is the IO Flyby. Let's check it out a little bit. I'm going to turn it up. This groove is great. Kind of rolling.
That's the DFAM.
Nice. And there we got the dubby chord stabs. Although these aren't vocoder based.
Yes, they are.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What do I know? I really like this kind of combination of electro and kind of dub techno elements. I think they fit together so well. Like, you can get really, really deep, but also have like really like kind of futuristic, fast, forward momentum.
And, you know, to me, this isn't really dubby. To me, like, this kind of the gating of the synth and having it like shimmer and float around like that, to me, that's like really futuristic sound.
Sure, absolutely.
I've never considered that to be dubby, but a lot of people say it's dubby.
I guess
But-
chords and echo
Yeah.
and minor triads or whatever. You're not playing just minor triads there, but
It's just the kind of sound that I really like, I guess. So
I'm right
if
there
it is
with you.
stubby, then that's stubby. That's, you know.
However you describe it, it doesn't have to fit an exact definition in terms of genre.
Yeah, this is off the first Science Cult release ever.
Nice.
Yeah.
Simple Sam says the percussion on this track has some cool sounds. Well, yeah, and I guess we need to eventually, pretty shortly, get into some of these cool sounds that you achieve. You can show us a few things. BPMF says dub is a form of futurism. Sure, I can see that. And
and all that is the Moog DFAM, which is my favorite, my favorite synth by far in the studio.
Interesting. I haven't really played with one.
I built my entire modular around the DFAM just to make it do more. So,
well, I think that's sort of the whole point with having patch points on a synth, is being able to expand and interact between modules, between different synths.
Yeah, and that's like I continually get more and more out of that synth than I do anything else. I don't know what it is. I think I just have a connection with the way it works. Like, it just makes sense to me, because I'll sit down for like an hour or 2 hours. Like, if I'm having a night where the music's just not happening, you know, I'm not feeling very creative, I'll sit down in front of the modular and I'll mess around with the DFAM for like a good hour or 2 hours, and I record the entire thing at 2496 so I can really mess with it later.
Nice.
And then I usually end up getting either like a really good selection of sounds out of it, like drum sounds, or in one there's a track I put out last year called Mechanical Matriarch, and it's got this really raspy, harsh, like DFAM synthesizer workout in it. And that's all it is. It's just, that was an hour of me on the DFAM just playing around, and then I edited it down into a 7-minute or a 6-minute long track.
Just DFAM?
It's just DFAM and drums. Just meat and cheese. I mean, it's really simple. Yeah. And I love that track because it just really hits. It's so raw, you know, it just hits really hard.
Nice. You've got I'm trying to make these segues as seamless as I can. Speaking of hitting hard, this is a remix you've done. I think that's upcoming. It's a little heavier than what we've been listening to.
Oh yeah,
a little darker. Yeah, this is the artist Liebknecht, and the track is called Barcelona.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the original. It's got this really like cool, like, ethereal kind of vibe to it.
I think it sounds like, all right, you've already told me that you make a lot of your own drum sounds. You have even like custom devices that you kind of, you know, you play your cards close, like you don't necessarily share those, but in general, I really like sort of synthesized drums that don't sound like your typical 808, 606, kind of your classic synth drums. And this is and it starts to get in a little bit more of a kind of IDM-ish sort of vibe when you use drums like this. And I like this as kind of a crossover there. Like, it's electro, it's a bit more aggressive, it's got these sort of sharper, more distinct drum sounds. So I'm guessing that's what you're doing here.
Yeah, and that's something, you know, a big influence of mine is Aphex Twin, Musig, or Mike Paradinas, Audiker. Those are like some of my biggest influences, all of these IDM guys. And what I've always loved about them is that no track ever sounds the same. Mm-hmm. So you don't get 5 tracks of 808 and 303 and 101. It is always different.
Right.
And so when I started making music, I kind of started with that same attitude. Like, I always want things to be different every time. And one of the sticking points where I was really unsatisfied for a long time was I could never find a drum machine that would do things so differently that it wouldn't sound like everything else. So there's definitely good parts to the 808. I love the 808 sounds, and there's a lot of good in that drum machine, but it has a limit, right?
Sure.
So
I mean, to break the limit, you have to use a lot of audio effects processing, which also is a good way to go.
Exactly. And I've done that. I've got a TR-8 over here that I've run through a variety of different semi-modular equipment and guitar pedals just to get really cool drum sounds out of it. But then I've been messing around with Reactor for probably about 10 or 15 years now. And so I started playing around with ideas on how to use Reactor to create a drum machine, essentially. And I found a drum machine on the user community that was like a really good bass template for what I wanted. And then I turned that into a custom drum machine of my own design. And that's essentially what you're hearing there it's my own drum machine. And whenever I wanted to do something different, I can just go in and I can change it. So I don't have to rely on it being limited by hardware design or anything like that.
Well, yeah, and I mean, this is a whole discussion to have about, like, with electronic music, you can make your own instrument from the ground up and then make music with it. But that's kind of, imagine a violinist who was, making his own violins. That's like two completely different, very difficult practices, right? Like, do the greatest violinists, are they capable of being a great luthier and vice versa? So electronic music kind of gives you more opportunities to ride that line. Like, you can create your own unique instruments from the ground up in something like Reactor, or putting together a modular system that no one else has the same configuration and isn't using the same way, and that becomes kind of a signature as an artist. It isn't for everybody, I would say. I have not dived into, I know a little bit about a Reactor, and I've even taught some very basic Reactor skills to people, just how to make like a very simple, like, one oscillator, one filter, one amplifier kind of synthesizer, just the ground up for the purposes of learning synthesis. And I haven't really gotten into modular synthesis because for me, like, it's too many steps in the way of making music. Sometimes it's just you have the instrument, it makes the sounds you like, and you make music, right?
Well, and it depends on how you use a modular. So I know that the overall view of somebody who uses a modular is that they're always thinking about, oh, well, I need to run this particular output into this particular thing because this has a function like a divider or an attenuator, and then I need to check my voltages. And there's so much thought being put into what makes a successful patch. I look at my modular as a chaos box that I am attempting to control. Okay. So I don't think about any of that. I look at input output and I say, I want this to go here and see what happens. And I do that for a while, and then I end up with a giant, mess of cables, but really cool sounds are coming out of it. I have no idea how I got there. I'm not entirely sure I could ever reproduce it, but because I've been recording it for an hour or 2 hours, I've now captured this journey that I just went on, And so when you take the analytical side out of using a modular, it can be a lot of fun.
Sure.
Just to kind of plug it in and see what happens, not so much think about what the function of that individual piece is.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's good. And I would agree, like, if and when I get around to building a modular setup for myself, I would definitely think of it more in that way, as opposed to like a complete system for making finished music or live performance. Exactly. I would want to experiment and make crazy noises and then incorporate that somehow into my traditional DAW-based sort of sequencing.
I have like one drum module in here, and I get more drum sounds out of my entire modular, even though it has hardly any drum sounds in it. Like, it doesn't have hi-hats and snare modules. It's just all synths,
right? Well, there's so much you can do with that. And that's, speaking of synthesis, that's definitely something that I'd like to do in the class that I teach for 343 Labs, kind of looking at synthesis and sound design and looking at it in a creative way. And, the course is synthesis and sound design for producers. And the idea is not to just learn the the science behind it, but to think creatively, you know, learning enough about synthesis so that you can make better creative decisions and have some techniques and, you know, find your own way in terms of whether you're making your own sounds or you're just using presets, understanding enough to be creative in the way that you want and like which tools are the ones for the job. And we're a little bit past the halfway point now. We've been having a nice discussion here, and I would love to just keep rambling on, and we're going to keep talking, but you do have some stuff prepared for us. Before we get into that, we haven't mentioned the giveaway this week. I'm sorry, but we do. There's still time, I believe. We should be getting a link in the chat here for your last chance to sign up for our giveaway this week, which is Arturia Pigments, which is a really great plugin. It's a very powerful, I would say, kind of hybrid synthesizer. It does wavetable, it does sampling and granular, and in their recent update to Pigments 3, they've added additive synthesis and some new features. It sounds great. It's one of the, especially in terms of things like additive synthesis can be quite strange, and it's a different way of thinking about making sounds, and it's got some peculiarities that I think they did a really good job. Arturia did a good job at making it accessible and easy to do interesting additive sounds with. So I'm actually going to, in an upcoming episode, I'm going to take a look at that. So definitely stick around for that. Keep watching. And I'll remind everybody to subscribe if you haven't already. Check out our links below for more information on the classes that we're running. And again, this is your last chance to join the giveaway. So keep an eye out for that link, and we'll announce the winner sometime towards the end of the show. All right, so are you ready? Let's get into some serendipity, some controlled chaos. Alrighty. So here we are. This is you. This is your screen. You're working with Ableton Live, and that's pretty much like that's your DAW of choice, pretty much for creating.
Yeah. So for creating for all the right brain activities, I prefer Ableton Live. But then when I do mix down, I put everything in the Studio One, the PreSonus DAW that they made, because it just takes me out of that creative mindset and puts me into the analytical mindset. Sure. But for creating and being able to quickly be able to control something, I love Ableton Live, despite some of the things that I wish would be improved. But so what I've done here is just some basic examples. Like I was talking about the DFAM and about how I like recording myself noodling around with the DFAM. Right. So this is one of those recording sessions where it's just this. I don't know if you can hear that, if that's loud enough, but so
yeah, we are. You know what? I'm going to interrupt you real quick. Can you increase the buffer size on the listen to, because we're getting some
absolutely.
Crackle.
Absolutely, yeah. So let's turn that 1 second.
I mean, that's okay. Let's give it a shot.
Yeah. Is that better?
I think so. I think actually some of it might just be in your recording that I'm hearing. It might be some clickingness that you are getting out of the DFAM. All right, sounding good. Let's keep.
So
going.
There's just a lot of like this kind of stuff going on.
Whoa, that's nasty.
So this is just me like spending like a good hour, or in this case, it's more like 16 minutes. Okay, so it feels like an hour in my head, right? Sure. But I spend quite a bit of time making that, and then I take it and I cut it apart, and I get as many sounds out of it as I want, and then I end up with something that's usable. So I end up with something like this, where I take all of these sounds, and I get really good kicks.
I see.
And things like that. I also have a Pearl Syncussion clone that I used, that I sent a bunch of like LFOs into to make it constantly change, and so I end up with something like this.
Is that the SY1M that you're talking about?
I don't know if you can see it,
but I know recently someone did a new Pearl Syncussion clone. I can't see it.
Yeah, it's this one right here.
Oh wait, let me switch this. Aha. Yeah.
Yeah, it's this one right here.
That's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah. So then I like using stuff like that just to give me a good basis. So I haven't built my own drum machine at this point. I've just been messing with a single synthesizer, and I ended up with a whole bunch of really cool drum sounds. And I give them weird names, so if anybody can see, yes, I call them farts and things like that.
Well, that's what sometimes they sound like.
And then a lot of times you can take just really useful loops out of that session.
Now, I want to ask you,
stuff like this.
where with this process, where does like kind of serendipity and controlled chaos and randomness come into the process?
Well, that's during the recording process. So there's a lot of things that happen during this right here that are unpredictable, because I'm sitting here and I'm not just very subtly adjusting parameters, but I'm really going, I'm really plugging things into different places and changing sequences as quickly as possible, or using an LFO to modulate the sequencer.
So you're not being careful. You're just like you're fooling around and pushing boundaries and lots of happy accidents. Let's say like things that happened and you're not even sure how you got there, but you got there and it's crazy.
And that's the best thing in the world, is to walk away from a synth session like that and be like, I have no idea what just happened. I have no idea how I did it or how I can reproduce it. It felt great. I feel like my mind has been cleared. I'm over, writer's block or stress or whatever's going on that day. And then I go back the next day and I'll listen to it and I'll be like, okay, so that was just a bunch of crap, but there's some really good drum sounds in there. Or it'll be like I did with Mechanical Matriarch, where it was just a whole bunch of like really cool ideas that needed to be edited down.
Right.
So I had like parts where I was like, okay, this can be used as a breakdown. And it was the part where I had to go to the bathroom and I stopped the sequencer, but for some reason it held the last note and it just kept going for like 20 minutes. It just kept going.
Okay.
And when I came back, it was still going, making funny sounds. So I edited that into a breakdown for the track.
Great. And that just totally happened randomly and you don't even know.
Yeah, I'd like to think of it as that the machines have kind of like a soul.
Sure.
That you're trying to exploit in a way. And I know that sounds a little like
use, it's just a word for use. You're using the machine and you're utilizing the character and the peculiarities and the personality of that machine. Machinality, whatever you want to call it.
But I'm, if you want to get into like really crazy random stuff, so I've prepared this.
We do want to get into crazy random stuff.
So this is a wavetable synth. And one of the things that I love about the wavetable synth is that you can sweep the oscillator, you can sweep the filter, you can modulate almost everything that you touch in here. But then I love the Ableton Live LFOs, so you can see.
So you're like using the LFOs with the sample and hold like a random modulator, basically, right?
Yeah, and I take it a step further where I have LFOs that are modulating each other.
Okay. So which is kind of like introducing jitter and like noise into the line, right? It's kind of like, I mean, you can do it that way.
It's a way of introducing organized chaos.
Yeah.
So I have a 16th rate LFO modulating the rate of an LFO. So it's doing,
and that's creating a really crazy shape, whatever that's doing.
Now these are purely data LFOs. So these are not audio rate LFOs.
Okay.
But I'm using LFOs all over the place because I can get it to change things like.
Well, let's hear some of what this can do. I'm curious.
So this is what it sounds like.
The machines are reaching out and speaking to us. Now, this to me sounds like some crazy modular patch.
Right. So I take that and I say, okay, this is cool. I could maybe render out, 20 minutes of that and then see if something cool comes out of it, and cut it apart. Or I can use it as part of a track. Or what I like to do is I like to vocode it. So this is just me.
Oh, here we are with the vocoder now. Great.
Yeah. So this is just me rambling some nonsense. So here's that.
It's a type of computer, so it speaks its own language, but it's unlike any language I've ever heard.
So it's just, me being a nerd.
Yeah.
And I use the wacky synth as the carrier, and I end up with this.
That's like one of the most electro things I've ever heard.
So I like using really crazy synths as the carrier signals for vocoding, because then the vocoder is no longer speech. It now becomes an instrument. Your voice becomes part of something.
Well, I can't tell what you're saying, and it sounds like robots talking.
Yeah,
it sounds like Star Wars.
Exactly. And I was actually telling you about this in Star Wars, particularly in the last season of The Mandalorian. There's these battle bots, right? And everything that they do, they're constantly talking. So they're constantly saying something, and it's this really low pitch vocode, like ring modulated kind of sound. Mm-hmm. And it makes no sense. But everything that they're doing, climbing a roof or something, that speech underscores their actions. So I like to think that you can use stuff like this to underscore what's going on in a track, to just add interest to it.
How does this sound? Like, does this work with the beat that you've got going on there? I'm just curious to hear it in the musical context.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's bring in some other things. So this is electromagnetic noise that I've recorded. I can't remember from what. So let's listen to that. Yeah, so this is just electromagnetic noise. This is the sound of a turntable motor stopping. So I took this, I don't know if you can show it on the screen. This right here, it's called an Electruci. It's an electromagnetic sensing microphone.
Okay.
They don't make this anymore, but there's a guy in Holland, in Amsterdam. He goes by Air Instruments, and he makes something called a bit sniffer. It's the same thing. You can find him on Etsy. It's an electromagnetic sensing microphone. So I took one and I put it onto a turntable with the platter removed, and then hit the start and stop button. Mm-hmm. And when you hit the start and stop button on a turntable, it ends up sounding like an 808 cowbell, and it sounds like this.
Oh, hold on. There we go.
Yeah.
That sounds awesome.
So I actually use this sound in one of my tracks called Obedience Paradox. And so it has musical content, so why not use it, right? So
well,
I've got
it's making that weird noise, but then there's a sine wave like tone that, or actually it's sort of more complex than that. It's like you said, it's bell like resonance, like a cowbell, like kind of a
exactly
tone.
So altogether,
that's a vibe. And this is a 4-bar loop.
Yep.
But there's all sorts of crazy stuff changing constantly, right? And that's as a result of the complex modulations you've set up, I think.
Yeah, you can take a 4-bar loop or an 8-bar loop and have it constantly change, either very subtly, or there can be parts of it that are changing so much that it ends up sounding like a complete piece of music. It's a little bit like a Stephen Reich track, where he has a piano loop constantly playing for like 20 minutes, and it's a track. It has composition. Mm-hmm. So obviously I don't use this all the time, but I like using bits and pieces of this where I feel it fits, because the one and only thing that I do when I go into the studio is I never go into the studio and say, today I'm going to write this kind of track. Like, I never do that. I'm always like, I wonder what happens if I take this guitar pedal and try to turn it into an oscillator for a wavetable synth that I've got, that I'm trying out a plugin for. How can I get this thing to self-oscillate? How can I get enough feedback out of this? Whatever it is that I'm working with. Like, I've got this a synthesizer made out of wood that I bought. It's a semi-modular. Like, how can I use this?
What does that sound like, I wonder?
It's really bizarre. Mm. Yeah. So it's a handmade circuit board. So if you touch it, it changes. It has like these, and it's got the whole thing is held together with rope. So, yeah.
Seriously.
So it's laser cut wood panels and rope and like these wires that he stripped that you can do, patching with. So I try to say like how could I use this to become the sound source for something I'm working on?
Right.
And you end up going on this journey of discovery where you're finding like either tonight it's not happening, like all I'm doing is making fart sounds and it's just not going anywhere, or tonight I've discovered something that I didn't think was possible. Like I didn't realize that I could run, the TRA through the Moog and then use the Moog, the DFAM as an effect,
Oh, great.
and then run the Moog into a guitar pedal that would amplify whatever I'm doing to it, and then run that into a spring reverb while I'm sitting there holding the spring reverb in my hand and plucking it. And so I'm creating percussion sounds on top of percussion sounds, and I'm just recording all of this and having fun with it. So you are the most random thing in your studio.
Absolutely.
You can produce, as a person, you can produce the most random possible.
Well, and
because-
truly, I mean, is anything truly random? I don't know, but like a human is capable of more unpredictable behavior than a machine ever, at least as far as we know.
Yeah. And I guess, it's a way of liberating your mind a little bit, is to say, I need to be able to think outside of the constructs that I'm used to, which is to always, go by the book, and to say, I'm not going to use this device the way that it was meant to. I'm going to exploit all of its weird features. Like you were saying with in your talk with Carl Finlow, when you're recording the trigger output of the 808.
Right.
No engineer ever intended for the 808 to work like that.
Nope.
But somebody figured that out and was like, I wonder what that is, and I'm going to record it.
As far as I know, Egyptian lover.
Yeah, and it turned into an iconic sound. And there's lots of stuff like that, where like the electromagnetic sensing microphone becomes an instrument. Or I have this thing here that Jimmy gave me. It's called a Soma Ether.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and this thing is crazy. Like, this thing is nuts. So you can walk around a city and have this on and record with it. And it records phone conversations and radios and, police scanner type stuff. And it just randomly records whatever it picks up.
And there's so much information in the magnetic whatever,
Yeah, there's so much noise that we don't hear, and this thing can. So if you want to go into the direction of like scanner or orb, this is definitely something to use.
I'd love to have something like that.
Yeah,
I've got to check out the guy you said is selling stuff now. Did you say he's on Etsy?
Yeah,
okay.
So he goes by Air Instruments.
Air Instruments, cool.
Yeah, and I have one of his modules here.
Oh, cool.
It's one of his Eurorack modules called a liquid glitcher. But I just checked him out yesterday on Etsy, and he sells this electromagnetic sensing microphone called the Bit Sniffer, and his is mono. This one is stereo, which makes it a little inconvenient to use sometimes. But his is mono, and it basically does the same thing. Like
checking it out now. This is the Bit Sniffer website. Listen to magnetic fields. That's what we're talking about here. Listen to lamps, computer, telephone, any electronics. Find crazy sounds effects, and it's so inexpensive. Look at that. Do you need to amplify this in a particular way, or you just plug it straight into your interface? Or
so I've got my electromagnetic sensing microphone plugged in right now.
Yeah,
and I'm passing it over my laptop.
Oh, hold on. Rewind. Try that again.
So this is roughly where the CPU is.
Uh-huh.
That's the GPU. That's the corner of the trackpad. So if I click the trackpad, I wonder what happens.
I don't hear change,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's purely mechanical then.
I was at Jimmy's studio a while back, and I had these with me, and he had something in his studio that had a screen on it. I can't remember what it was, but I passed the sensors over it, and it started making musical tones.
That's amazing.
And I was like, "Oh, that's so cool!" And I was standing there doing this.
Speaking
And
of
he's
musical
like,
tones, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I want to get back into the chat a little bit. We're winding down. We're almost to the end of our hour. Of course,
Okay.
we don't have to stop exactly at 2, but I just want to sort of give the heads up there. We have a winner for our giveaway. Congratulations to Michelle DeVito. You have won your own copy of Arturia's Pigments VST and audio unit. Again, it's a really great synth. Hope you enjoy it. And if you're not sure what to do with it and you need some help, that's why we're here. We do synthesis. I do a synthesis and sound design course. I use Pigments in that course. And, you know, to all of you considering getting into music production and you feel like a class, some kind of guided mentorship could help you get where you want to go, do consider 343 Labs. And what else is going on here in the chat? Now, so, Sean Higgins asked, "Where's the melody?" Now, you were talking about discovering these musical tones with this, you know, in the magnetic field, but like sort of going back to the randomness and the chaos, the controlled chaos that you're doing, you know, in your set here. Actually, if you don't mind going back to your screen share,
Yeah.
and let's listen to this again. And like, I'm just curious, like, what if anything is melodic about this, and how do you tease a melodic or harmonic structure out of a random situation like this? And how would you approach randomness in terms of melody?
Well, like with this recording right here, so just without any of the effects, it sounds really noisy. But that is a tone.
Yeah,
So I can
hear a
and
pitch, a musically identifiable pitch.
Right. So I can tone that down, and I can take just that and make it part of a wavetable synth.
Right.
Or I can take it a step further, just listen to it. And so there's a sine wave right here.
Mm-hmm. With
that
some
kinda
noise on it, some weird little overtones on it too.
So for me, this has melodic content. And because I'm a little bit lazy sometimes, I just take that by itself and just put it right in to the arrangement and make it into, you know, this. So for me, at that point, that's enough for this. That's just part of it.
Okay.
But like with the DFAM, you know, I took just a really small loop from this entire session right here, and I found something melodic in it. Sorry, I need to
clear out those solos.
So there's very subtle melodic content in this, but it's also in the drums that I've written, where I've taken some of the tones that I found, you know, like I've got this, I can't remember what it was, but it wasn't this, but it was one of the tones that when I stretched it, it ended up becoming a lot more musical. It ended up having sort of it was this right here. So it goes doo-doo-doo-doo-doo.
Okay.
You know, it has this weird, like,
Got
it does this, and I don't know.
It sounds it's bending up an octave. So
yeah, so
that's an
it's one of
interesting thing
those-
to think about. I mean, this happens all the time in techno and electro and those kind of genres, which are less sort of, you know,
Yeah.
melody, chord progression, song oriented. There's a lot of weird noises repeating. A lot of times, melodic and harmonic content is part of the percussion, and that you're exploring weird noises and drums and percussion and effects and modulation, changing all those things over time, and kind of finding harmony and melody in the noise, in the chaos of the sounds.
Exactly. And full disclosure, I'm not a classically trained musician. I'm not like a keyboard player. I mean, I find everything purely by chance. So I climper around on the synths, and I'm like, okay, that sounds cool. I'm gonna work with that. But I am always more into the sound design and finding some nugget of something, melody or whatever, in the chaos and the noise and whatever I've produced that day. And so that's how I end up with stuff that is vaguely musical, but you can really build more layers of musical like stuff into it, so more melody and things like that.
So I'm just putting on one last thing to listen to before we say goodbye. This is a yet to be released track that you've done together with Visions of Gloucesters,
yeah.
Jovi and Pearl. And this actually, I mean, this might be a good example of finding some kind of harmony out of the noise. It's really nice, kind of chill intro with the pads, and then
there's a plugin called the Live Cut. Have you heard of it?
that's been around a while, hasn't it?
Yeah, unfortunately it doesn't work on 64-bit
Right.
computers anymore, but I have an older Mac here that I keep around just to run Live Cut stuff through it, and I love that thing because you can run hours worth of drums through it and never end up with the same thing. It always comes up with something new.
So, I mean, there are lots of plugins out there that kind of do glitchy sample transformation, rhythmic chopping. There's something different about Live Cut. I'm not quite sure. I mean, if I recall, it's not perfectly synced. It's not quantizing everything. You kind of have to go in milliseconds. Do I remember correctly?
No, it goes by quavers.
Quavers.
So, yeah, it's called the BB Cut library, and it was based on a super collider quark called BB Cut. And it was developed something like 25 years ago, and it was a way of rhythmically cutting up beats in really micro time increments. So
Okay. Does
it
it
cuts
somehow
the-
sense transients? Or
Yeah.
Okay, so it's
Yeah, it
reacting
has-
to the input. It's not just arbitrarily chopping it into a certain small piece. It's adjusting in real time to the input.
yeah,
That's great.
yeah, it's an incredibly cool plugin, and the creator Graham,
Smart Electronics.
Smart Electronics. He hasn't done anything to bring it up to 64-bit. I wish he would, because it is such a versatile plugin. It's one of those plugins where the plugin itself doesn't have a sound.
Right.
You can use it on speech, you can use it on synths. Depending on how you adjust it, it just does different things every time, and I really love it. So I keep
I'm
an
guessing,
old
did
computer
you use
around
it on
just
this?
for that. Yeah, quite
Okay.
a bit actually.
Because there is a lot of sort of glitchiness and rhythmic remanipulation going on in this. And
Yeah, and we also use this thing called the Super Trigger, which is
that
by
I
the
remember.
same.
That's another
Yeah.
old one. Yeah, there's some amazing, like, earlier plugins and synths that, again, you mentioned you keep an old computer around so you can run
Yeah.
it.
And these are free, by the way. These
Yeah.
were never paid. These were
Exactly.
all free plugins. So
What's another one? Oh, Crazy Ivan. Did you ever use that one? The Crazy Distortion plugin that
Yes.
they had?
I put a track out on Ian Voigt's Gushki called Aleph Zero,
Mhm.
and it has this really crazy long breakdown that just goes, "Ooh," and then it kind of wraps around. It's a little bit of like a drum code kind of sound.
Okay.
And that whole track, that's all Crazy Ivan.
Drum code, you mean like the old drum code?
Yeah, like the old drum code, yeah.
Are you
So-
familiar with something called 32 Lives?
Yes,
Sound Radix, does it work with that?
it does not work on Catalina. It only works on Mojave.
Okay,
Yeah.
so yeah,
So-
William Mind Readers popped this up in this question in the chat, and there are some ways to run old plugins in 64-bit, but yeah, I guess that needs to be updated to work on the newer OS.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have a 16-inch MacBook Pro, which cannot be downgraded to Mojave. So I cannot run any 32-bit code on here. And I do have 32 lives. I have it installed on the other computer. I also have a PowerBook here.
Oh wow!
In case anyone's interested. Yeah, it's running Mac OS 9 and Mac OS 10 Tiger.
My wife
so I
might
can
still
run.
have her old PowerBook in a drawer.
Yeah.
I might have to pull that out.
There's some really cool sound design plugins in OS 9 that have not been touched or looked at in 30 years. So I still have a PowerBook just to run the odd thing. Like there's this thing called MetaSynth.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
So every once in a while I use that. There was a speech synthesizer that would use the Mac's speech engine to let the Mac sing. And then there's this one called Thonk
Oh,
that you
I don't
can
know
just,
that.
yeah, you put a sound file into it, and then you can let it run for like 3 hours. And it just constantly takes that sound and regurgitates it, and you end up with 10 minutes worth of just audio, and it's something completely new. It's unlike anything you fed into it, and it'll have voices in it. It'll have vocal
That
sounds
must be
in it.
incredible. But again, I think that just to tie this all into our general conversational theme today is like, it's kind of experimenting and exploring and discovering and finding something out of the chaos to kind of rein in and make it musical. Just like you were using with the electromagnetic stuff, you're just getting random noise, and sometimes that becomes musical. And even just taking a sample of that and repeating it simply, like you are putting with some effects on it on the timeline, can be a
Yeah.
really easy way. But then there are these other tools out there that are designed to sort of explore the further reaches of sound that might just come up with nonsense, but then it's up to you as the human in charge to extract the interesting musical elements of that chaos, of that nonsense, and control it and make it your own musically.
Yeah.
This has been great. I want to wrap it up now. Let me just acknowledge the chat. I want to say thanks to everybody who came in today, and I see a lot of new names today. Congratulations again to our winner of Arturia's Pigments, and thanks to Arturia and our other sponsors for providing the prizes in our giveaways each week. And yeah, thanks so much for being my guest today. And
Thank you for having
it's
me.
been really interesting getting a little peek into your world here, your universe, and
My
realize that,
weird brain.
yeah, a lot, we were saying this before, a lot of people into electro and this kind of music are pretty nerdy, and I include myself in that, and it's all good. I think that's a good thing. Nowadays, it's not like when we were kids in the 80s where being called a nerd was like social ostracization. Nowadays, it's awesome. If you're a nerd and you're really into something and real good at it and you know a lot about it, that's going to only move you forward. So, nice. Really enjoyed this. Thanks to everybody. And come back next week. I'm doing something a little bit different. I've got Andrew Barton from Bass Agenda Recordings. Are you familiar? You're familiar with Bass Agenda, I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah. This guy, man, I called him kind of a pillar of the underground techno and electro scene. He has done so much hard work. He has been running his label for a long time. He does a radio show. He's a great supporter of new artists, and he's broken some artists. Like, he's definitely done first releases of some noteworthy names on his label, and he's going to be my guest, and we're going to talk, looking at it a little bit more on the not exactly business, because, when you're doing underground music, there isn't a lot of money, but, what's it like running a label at a certain level, and, sort of, how he thinks about music from that side, as well as just being a lover of music as, personally, and, talking about when you're a new artist, like, how do you approach a label? What is he looking for? That kind of thing. And just having the general conversation and doing a little bit of an overview of the label. And we'll be doing a lot of listening as well. So I hope you guys all come back for that. And then after that, we'll be starting another new round. We'll be announcing well, I don't think the schedule's not changing, but I've got some stuff planned that I'm looking forward to. So anyway, thanks again to all. Thanks again to Stefan, aka Syrte. I'm glad I finally got the pronunciation right. Yeah. And thanks to all of you in the chat for being here today. Have a good week. I'll see you next time. Adios.